On the Charge Report, brought to you by BP Pulse, official EV charging partner of the Ryder Cup.
Just over 2 weeks to go now until the start of the Ryder Cup at Whistling Straits. There's still plenty for Europe captain Padraig Harrington to consider and to look ahead to. With us now, we have 2014 winning captain Paul McGinley. Hi there, Paul. Really good to speak to you. We'll talk Team Europe in just a moment. We're going to start with golf's new $15 million winner. Patrick Harrington came through that final day battle with Jon Rahm to land the FedEx Cup, of course. Just how good was that performance, given the pressure?
Yeah, of course. I mean, $15 million is a huge amount of money, as we know. But, these guys are very wealthy individuals anyway. I'm sure it meant a lot to them, but not as much as it would have meant to a lot of people. But still, nonetheless, it was a great win. It was a great performance and a head-to-head with Jon Rahm, who was arguably being the best player in the world this year, with his win in the US Open, as well as lots of other top tens and big finishes in the year. But nonetheless, a great finish to the season for Patrick Harrington, running into form at just exactly the right time to scoop that huge prize.
I mean, absolutely. You mentioned just at the right time. He secured a place on Team USA for the Ryder Cup. 6 players now confirmed. 6 more to be picked by Steve Stricker. We've got to wait till Wednesday for that. But, I mean, you just look at the lineup. It's pretty formidable, isn't it? This is what Europe are going to have to go up against. A lot of players to choose from with his picks.
Yes, there is. I mean, a huge amount of them there. I was just writing them down there, Hayley, before we come on. I mean, Finau, Xander Schauffele, as well as Jordan Spieth. I think it's pretty guaranteed that those 3 will definitely be in. In all probability, Harris English will also be in the team. So that leaves the last 2, you'd have to say. They're the 6 that are already qualified, and they're definitely 100% going. But there's a huge amount of resources at the captain Steve Stricker's disposal here, with a lot of players coming into form at the end of the season and pushing themselves into contention. We had Patrick Reed, who 2 weeks ago we would have said was a guarantee to be picked, but of course he's been in hospital with some serious illnesses over the last few weeks, and culminated in him coming back next week come back last week. And performing reasonably well, you'd have to say, considering such a serious illness he had. But will Stricker take a chance with him? And then the guy who has really pushed and raced and ducked for the line is Kevin Na, who's had an incredible run of form in the last 4 or 5 weeks, at several second-place finishes, and coming third in the event yesterday. Now, without the point system and the head start that Cantlay and Rahm had, he would have won that tournament on his own if it had been just a normal tournament. So it's interesting to see what he's going to do, because that Kevin Na is a real dogged competitor, a Corey Pavin character, people who remember old Ryder Cups, and a pretty formidable opponent, no doubt, should a European player come up against him. Interesting to see, even though he's 18th in the points list, if Stricker is going to go down that far to pick Kevin Na ahead of some guys who've been pretty much there all season long.
Well, we will find out on Wednesday. What about Team Europe then? 1 tournament left for qualification points. We've got, it's a big one. It's Wentworth this week. Looking forward to that. Looking at how it stands for Padraig Harrington, do you think he'll be pleased with how his team is shaping up already?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I'm sure he's looking for a bit more form than what we've seen from a lot of the top players. That is the team at the moment. A very welcome return to form last week from Tommy Fleetwood there, who's had a very quiet summer. But a big second place finish yesterday in Italy will have buoyed Padraig Harrington, no doubt. Obviously, Jon Rahm, we know how good he is. Victor Hovland, we know how good he is and how well he played last week as well. Paul Casey. Fitzpatrick and Hatton, you'd have to say a couple of question marks over their form. And Rory McIlroy is always solid. We look then at Shane Lowry, who's the last man in at the moment. And again, some good form from the Irish guy, and a guy, obviously, the Open champion last year. And he potentially could be knocked out of the team by Bernd Wiesberger this week. Should that be the case, I think there's a good chance that Shane Lowry will be the 3rd pick. Padraig has already gone on record as saying that it's likely he's going to pick Sergio Garcia for one of his picks, and Ian Poulter for the second one. So that leaves 1 pick open, and many people are saying that it could be Justin Rose. But with Bernd Wiesberger potentially, with a decent finish this week, knocking Shane Lowry out, that could mean that Shane would be the pick over Justin Rose. So there's a few permutations to go. There's always somebody who's going to duck for the line. You can be guaranteed on that, just like Kevin Na did over on the American side. Somebody's going to duck for the line this week with a big finish. As you say, there's a huge amount of points available this week. And some guys have a chance to come from way behind and kind of off the radar with a win or second place here and propel themselves into the team.
What about Henrik Stenson? Is he going to make it?
Good call there with Henrik Stenson. You know, there's a guy who had a terrible season. He's, one of his worst ever seasons. He's been ranked well outside the top 100 in the world. Very unusual spot for him to be in. But you're right. Over the last 3 weeks, he's gone 2 top 5 finishes as well as a 15th place. Considering he's had no form whatsoever all summer long and was miles off the radar 3 weeks ago, he's taken this opportunity in the last 3 weeks, playing on the European Tour and playing very well, as we can see from that shot in there. So put himself right back on the radar. I still think he has to do something. I still think Padraig will be looking for a big finish from him this week. But certainly he's gained a lot of ground on somebody like Justin Rose, who has chosen not to play the last 3 weeks, and many people's favourite to have been the pick. But Henrik has gained a lot of ground on Justin in the last 3 weeks, and now it's a head-to-head between those two, with potentially Shane Lowry thrown into the mix or somebody coming from behind. So there will be some movement over the next 4 or 5 days as players look for the line, as I say, with a huge amount of points that are available. So it's not a foregone conclusion by any chance.
What do you think Padraig Harrington is going to be feeling right now? You've been in his position, of course, just 2 weeks away from it all.
Yeah, I think just some continued good form, Hayley, from his players. And, he was a very welcome return, as I say, from Tommy Fleetwood last week. I think Matt Fitzpatrick, Tyrrell Hatton, Lee Westwood, he'd like to see form from them this week. That would really buoy him. He knows where the rest of them are with their form. And, if Henrik Stenson is going to make the team, or Justin Rose is going to make the team, the really experienced players he'd like to see on the team, but he'd like to see some form from them this week. So they have an opportunity to really showcase themselves in a huge event on the European Tour and give Padraig no chance other than to pick them. And so he'll be looking for those guys to stand up to the plate. They've done it before in the past, and they will be very welcome. Either one will be very welcome additions to the team should they make it. But some form would certainly seal it for them.
Great to speak to you, Paul. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure. Thank you.
On the Charge Report, brought to you by BP Pulse, official EV charging partner of the Ryder Cup.